We're going to spend the next hour or so, I believe, with Mary, who is going to be interviewing Lawrence, and we're going to hear all the fabulous stories of being a New York boy, yeah?
A 65-year-old.
Excellent. Welcome to your own stage.
Thank you. Oh, I guess this goes to her.
Thanks. I just have a temporary thing here.
You didn't do that for me. No. Okay.
So, Lawrence.
Wait a minute.
No,
Oh.
I'm white.
Oh, you're wired.
So I understand you were part of the New York group that went up to visit Jane.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But you also told me that you were interested in talking about how you've been using the material and
Oh, okay.
how it affected
All
you
right,
now.
that's what we were going to talk about tonight. Okay. Well, I think I need to start with backing up and trying not too hard to focus upon this stuff. But when I began going to class, I was in pretty bad shape, and I was almost a recovering addict, and I was a semi-recovering addict, and I was involved with this Gnostic school of teaching, and it still was a huge part of my belief system. And some of the other boys who had not been allowed into the school or had been kicked out of the school had found a way to get to Jane's class. Our pal Jeffrey Marcus had written. He had written to Jane and told her he had read the books and he was, would really like to go to class and see what it's like. So Jane said, okay. She let Jeffrey come up, and Jeffrey took a bus. And you got to remember, we were a group of guys living in. I was in Manhattan. The rest of the guys, some of us were in the Bronx, but we all grew up in Whitestone. This strange neighborhood near the Throgs Neck Bridge in Queens, and most of those guys had known each other since kindergarten. They were incredibly bound to one another, and I was an outsider. But at any rate, I became friends with Richard Kendall and Jeffrey, and they kind of brought me into that group. And while I was in the school, the teacher, who in Sue's book, if any of you remember in Sue's book, when they talk about the Gnostic teacher Arturo, that I was in his school, and he, the quick, cute little interesting story is he would call Jane every week. He would call. He basically was trying, like a fair amount of people, was trying to figure out ways how do I access Seth without Jane? Because Jane knew this guy was full of shit. I mean, she just was like, what's this guy's problem? And she was worried about the boys, that this guy had so much influence over us, and what he was teaching was not, in the long run, was not going to be very healthy for us. And so anyway, he was kind of like a mosquito in her ear, and she wasn't too fond of him. And he wasn't very fond of her, but he was very fond of Seth. And at any rate, Jane got worried enough about Francois that she decided to send Helper. And if everybody remembers who Helper is, Helper was one of Seth. Helper was one of Jane's attributes, buddies, powers. I don't know how you would put it. But if sometimes, somebody would be really sick or whatever, and she would just think, all right, Helper, go help this person. Well, she sent Helper down to New York. Swear to God. Francois, who was just this, I said Francois, I didn't say Arturo. How about that?
Yeah.
I'm in trouble now.
No, Francois in the library.
Francois, who probably was maybe 42, 41 years old, probably a bodybuilder, just this incredibly powerful guy. He was walking down the street with his girlfriend and keeled over and dropped dead. And for quite some time after that fact, we were all, you don't want to piss Jane off.
I don't think Jane was into killing people.
Yeah, and because by that point we were beginning to understand there's no coincidences, we were like, you don't want to fool with Helper. And at any rate, Francois dies, and because he was dead, the school needed more males, and luckily or unluckily, they decided to let me and Rick into the school. So I was thrilled. I mean, I had gotten into the school that I really wanted to get into, and I was the sex toy for about 15 women. And I was 22 years old, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. And I thought everything was pretty good. But more and more and more, the other guys who at that point, they were Ricky and Richard Kendall and Jeffrey, were becoming regulars going to Elmira. And they would have all these, at some day when the class transcripts get published, you could just see these arguments going on between Ricky and Richard about just Gnostic minutia, just, and the poor people in class just had to like, oh my God, here they go again, and that they'd be arguing about how do you get rid of this, how do you make this work with the Seth material, and you don't. And they had a really hard time realizing that. And at any rate, I think I told most of this last time, but finally, Dickie and Jeffrey they got really concerned that I was I was really getting sucked into the Gnostic school, and there's a pun in there, and that they were going to have to get me out with a crowbar, and finally they almost kidnapped me. They were like, "Do you want to go to class?" And I said, "Yeah, eventually," but I was still, to me, Seth was another teacher. I didn't have, my head wrapped around exactly, what Seth was. I mean, I knew, there were a couple of books. The ESV Power, Seth Materials, Seth Speaks. And when I got to class, maybe a month or two later, Oversoul 7 came out, and then Personal Reality. But those guys talked to Jane, and Jane said, yeah, you can bring a guest. And they brought me up, but they had to do it in 2 cars, because Rick would have gone ballistic. I mean, he did not want me to go, all right, because he wanted to play both sides of the field, and so at any rate, the boys took me up, and we thundered like it was like a herd of buffalo. We parked the car and flew up the stairs, because you wanted to get the couch or you wanted to get the floor right by the rocker. And I lucked out. I mean, we got there a little early. I was on the couch, but when we came in, Jane was in the rocker, and I'd run up the stairs with the other guys, and I was like, "Why are we running?" And I walked in, and I was kind of standing there looking around, and Jane turned around and looked at me, and it was just, I know you, and I'm home. And she just smiled. This pretty magical smile, and I just knew I was home. And this gigantic weight had been taken off of my shoulders. And we sat down, and as the class went on, at one point, the argument between Ricky and Dickie starts up again. And meanwhile, I'm kind of checking out the classmates and listening to Jane, and it was just pretty spectacular stuff. And then Seth comes through, and I did have hair on my neck at that point, and it stood up. It was just, it really, again, I apologize to you guys who've heard this over and over again, but it was truly an alien experience. And I use that word specifically. And it was just, Seth came through almost barking at these guys. Something about, why he's arguing, you both are convinced you're right, and this is why wars happen, and why don't you guys, I'm paraphrasing like crazy here, but he was basically going, when are you guys going to shut up about this stuff? And I was like, here's this thing. yelling at two of my best friends, and where's the door, just in case. And that night, at one point, Seth looked right at me, and he mentioned something about how, you can. Oh, all right. The first words out of his mouth to me, Seth looked at me and he said, "Value your ego. It is a good and valuable friend." And I was like, where'd you come up with that? None of the other books I read said anything like that. I'm supposed to transcend the ego somehow or whatever. The ego wasn't particularly didn't come across as something that you really wanted to nurture or anything like that. So he did the ego thing, and at the end of his little piece about the ego, again, he's looking right at me, and he says, basically something like, you should talk to yourself or be fond of yourself as much as you would a squirrel. Now, my friends don't know anything about this stuff, right? And all my life, one of my main totems has been the squirrels. I'd look at the squirrels, and I always knew that they were very magical, and they were playing with time. It would be like I would be in my, when I lived in Elmira, I had this great tree, squirrel center, and the cats would come into the yard and they would kind of creep up, get somewhere near the squirrels, and the squirrels would let them get pretty close, and then they'd be up on the tree chattering down, and you knew they were telling the cat, you schmuck, there's no way you're ever gonna catch me. And I was always really drawn to them. For whatever reason, they were a strong symbol of positive, powerful, running away and laughing and playing with life kind of stuff. And there was something else that night. I mean, he hit a couple of nails on the head that I just was like, my God, I got to come back here. And all night, as the class went on, I knew I was going to have to, when it was all over, I was going to have to go over and ask Jane if I could come back. And I was terrified. I mean, I was terrified that she might say no. And basically, I went, we were getting ready to leave, and the class had left, and the guys always kind of stayed a little longer because, we were about to go for another 5-hour drive, and Jane would, let us hang out a little while. Once in a blue moon, Seth would come through. Of course, none of that's on tape, but at any rate, I had my tail between my legs and kind of had my head down, and I was very shy at that point in life. And, I asked her if I could come back, and she smiled, and she said, of course, you belong here. And, that night was definitely a high water mark, in my life. And at any rate, now that that's out of the way. But coming from that point, for the first 6 months, 8 months, or whatever it was that I was going to class, Seth spent a lot of time working on the guys from New York, tearing down this belief system that we had bought into. And, just all this completely nutso Gnostic stuff about archons and angels. You had to, when you died, there were like, committees basically that had swords, and, they would ask you questions, and if you came up with the wrong answer, they would crush your soul like a grape. And I was like, nah, I don't think that doesn't sound like fun. And we were all terrified because we had believed it. So obviously, if we had died at that point, I would have been a crushed grape, because I didn't know the right answers at that point, because Francois hadn't given them to me. And Seth went on, and I mean, you can find this stuff in some of the books where Seth is like very emotional about any time anyone comes to you and tells you that they have the answers. You turn around and run as fast as you can. Because, he didn't, this isn't how he ended it, but I took it to mean, you run as fast as you can, because they don't know jack. For them to even be able to say that, clearly they don't know what they're talking about. And, that's why I get uncomfortable still when people come around and say, well, I'm a Seth teacher. I can teach you the Seth material. And I'm like, well, Seth called himself an unteacher for a reason. And it really is. I mean, I think the relationship between you and the physical book, it's really kind of, you have a direct line. This is a telephone, the material is, really whatever you need to come from the material, you're going to create it. It's going to be there. I know I'm not the only one in the room who has, read the same book numerous times and thinks, yeah, I know what's in that book. And one day, something is kind of, there's something you're working on or thinking about, and you kind of pick up Seth material at random, and you open it up and you think, oh yeah, Seth material, Seth 101, there's nothing in there. And there's this incredible amount of pretty involved material there. And I've opened up the book and I'm like, I know that wasn't there the last time that I know it wasn't there. The book has changed. I mean, you close the book, the letters run around, and next time you sit back and you open up the book and you need a certain answer, hi, Lawrence, and you're like, wow, oh my God. I mean, I've had that numerous times with ESP power. People think, oh, ESP power, there's nothing in there. Well, as long as Seth is in there, there's something in there. It's, I don't think, not that I'm biased or whatever, but for me, all of the Seth books are incredibly valuable. And again, for me, maybe because I'm a dinosaur, when Seth said, read the books in order of publication, over and over and over again, he said that. And these last couple of years, I've been kind of trying to, you know, bite my tongue when people go, you know, come to, you know, send me an email and said, you know, I just started reading the material and I bought the early sessions and I'm all ready to go. And I'm like, well, it's good that you bought the early sessions. Everybody should have the early sessions, but put them away. put them in a closet somewhere and pick up Seth material and then Seth Speaks and Personal Reality and on that way. Because without the foundation that the published book gives you, the early sessions is just gonna, you know, fly right over your head. And also the shock of opening up the early sessions and I forget what, it's like 12 pages of gibberish of you know, 12 pages of Ouija board, the kind of stuff that happens when I touch the Ouija board, you know, gobbledygook and whatnot. And, you know, it goes like that for a little while. And then out of nowhere, Seth is just full blast, you know, laying out this incredible stuff. And I look and I'm like, I am just so impressed that Jane and Rob didn't like run out of the room, you know, because it was like, wait a minute, wait a minute. A minute ago, you were talking about Frank Watts, whatever, and, you know, and now all of a sudden you're talking about this incredibly detailed new way of looking at reality.
Well, Lawrence, I hate to interrupt, but since you're the only one in the room, to my knowledge, that actually attended the ESP classes or Jane's classes, could you talk a little bit about what particular classes after the initial time meant the most to you? Or did Seth address you particularly about an experience or two that you had? Or maybe get back on that track a little bit?
No, thank you. Please, that's why you're here. You know, once that string in the back of my head gets pulled, I okay, I'll tell these stories. You gotta.
Well, no, there's nothing wrong with your story.
I need a rudder, you know. And again, when people ask, what did I get from the material? It is a rudder. Guaranteed, without the material, I wouldn't be here. Well, I'd have nothing to be saying to you folks that you'd want to hear. But I'd be dead. I had you know, like a lot of people in the early 70s, I was searching for meaning and doing all of that spiritual stuff and reading Carlos Castaneda and taking lots of chemicals and reading Alan Watts and then taking a lot more chemicals, and there was a pattern growing there. And, you know, when I started reading Seth, the chemicals were a joke, because I got higher from reading the material than I ever got from, I can say that. I got the, you know, an out-of-body trumps a ball of hashish any day of the week. But some of the classes that were that just stand out as that really stand out for me is sorry, local Bay Area people, but I had one, you know, we had one class, and for some reason, I told the story about how my sister-in-law died in my arms, and I don't know how it came up, but Mary died of an overdose while I was holding her and smacking her, throwing water, trying to wake her up. And we wait for the ambulance to come. And my brother couldn't be in the house when they showed up because he was on parole. And if, he was found in a house where there were drugs, they'd put him back in prison. So I had to deal with all this stuff. And so at one point, I'm shaking Mary, I'm smacking her, throwing water in her face, I'm screaming, Mary, 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 come on, wake up. And I could feel her. And then at one moment, I was alone in the room. And, she was still breathing. She was still kind of, her body was still functioning to some degree. But I was alone in the room, and I knew it. And it was kind of tough. And I told the story in class, and I had bottled the whole thing up because I had to go and tell my brother and his son that Eddie, your wife is gone, and the kid, you've got no mom. And it still chokes me up, sorry. But I told the thing in class, and next thing I knew, I was sobbing. And Samari comes through. And Samari comes, they look at me, and they start singing this song. And then at one moment, it kind of started out where it was a Samari song, and it sounded like, there were multiple, it was like a bunch of people singing through Jane, which unfortunately doesn't really come across on the tapes, but sometimes during Samari you would hear in the song, and it really was like, you knew there was more than one voice coming out of her. Like there were times it was like a choir. And this one started out where there was a bunch of voices basically trying to get my attention. And then there was Mary, and she reached over and she kind of, patted me on the knee and looked at me. And I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that, I could feel, that was Mary. And she was smiling, she was glowing, and I just, inside, I could basically feel what she was saying. And she was saying, why are you sad? Here I am. I'm doing great. This place rocks. I'm having a great time. Don't be an idiot, And I kind of like, oh, well, okay. And the song went on for a while, but I'm not kidding you. From that moment on, I had absolutely no doubt whatsoever about the survival of the soul. After a couple of out-of-bodies, I was pretty sure, well, there is no death, But when Mary let me know that not only was there no death, there was like a party going on. And it was like, she was having a real good time. Now, I couldn't quite explain this to my brother. But he was like, well, okay, if you say she's okay, well, fine. I just wished I could have made that clearer to him. But at any rate, that was pretty special. And just some of those times when, Seth would come through, and there would be times Seth would come through and just kind of sit there, and there would be a conversation between the other class members, and I always knew. I was like, I could feel, he was pretty easy to feel. When Seth came, it was just kind of, there was an effect on the camouflage. It was just kind of, things got a little, it became a little more apparent that, this stuff isn't real. It isn't solid. Seth is, Seth, and Seth actually, there were numerous times where Jane would be talking and you could feel Seth in the room. You knew he was gonna, he was waiting for to make his grand entrance and pop in and,
Didn't you guys bait him a little bit?
Oh, yeah, well, there was, actually, it was pretty much a contest at times. If, we had driven 250 miles up there, and being in a car with these particular people, and it was a challenge. And so when we got up there, we kind of really expected, we expected something to happen. We expected Seth to come through. There were times Seth, didn't come through, and they were great classes. A lot of the best stuff that happened up there that doesn't get, talked about a whole lot was, there were classes where, Jane just kind of, held court all night, and just this amazing stuff would come through. And
just a little aside on that, Richard Kendall transcribed, because they had not been transcribed before when it was just Jane. So a number of years ago, he transcribed those. So they actually, I believe, are at the library now. I think anyway. I have them, I know. So, but you're right. They were terrific. Jane had some wonderful things to say.
what,
Pardon me?
Papers you described, they exist in Sterling or some other library?
he's asking if they're in Sterling or some other library.
Sterling. Sorry.
That's the only place they are?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Although Rick may publish them at some time, I'm not sure, because there are tapes.
Yeah. What else? Yeah, the wig story. I don't want to tell the wig story.
No, but would you tell the Civil War story? Or are
Okay.
you sick of that? Because I like that one.
Now I'm not going to get out of this room alive. Some of the Bay Area Seth folks will be laying in wait with lead pipes and whatever. But I'll do the Civil War guy. Actually, I can feel the Civil War guy tonight. When I was doing, while I was going to class, and this is one of the pieces I wrote for Sue's book. We had been doing a lot of reincarnational work We had been talking about reincarnation a lot in class, and I would get stuff in dreams and whatnot, little bits and pieces, but nothing really spectacular. And then one day, really, it was like, a Thursday or something like that. And I got up, I'm getting ready to go to work, shower, come out, and I'm just getting ready to shave. And I'm shaving, and all of a sudden, here's my face in the mirror, and behind me, there's the bathroom wall. And I'm shaving, and all of a sudden, the bathroom wall in the mirror is gone, and there's a forest there. And I was like, well, this is interesting. Now, do I run out of the room screaming like, oh my God, I've gone crazy? Or do I go for a ride here? And I said, all right, I'll go for a ride. And then the face changed. And then I was in this forest. I was in this guy's head. And this was a Confederate soldier, I believe a lieutenant. And he was not a nice guy. And he really, really offended me. He really, really scared the bejesus out of me. And I did not like being in his head. I did not like looking out through this guy's eyes. Even at that moment, I knew, obviously, that this was some aspect of me. And even though it probably lasted probably 4 minutes or something like that, it felt like I was in there for, half hour or something like that. It was just time didn't mean it. Funny, time didn't mean a thing, And he was about to torture. He was threatening to torture this prisoner that they had. And he was talking about like cutting off this guy's digits and other pieces that you don't want anybody to cut off of you. And I just was like, oh my God. And I came up to class and we started with, did anybody have any good dreams this week or any experiences? And I was like, well, I got a little one, and I told what had happened. And as I was telling it, I was kind of getting angry that that there was a part of me. I'm a kid. Maybe I was 23 when this happened. And, I had a pony, I had hair, and it was down to the middle of my back. And I had burnt my draft card, and, I was not a big war guy. And so I was talking about this guy and how creepy he was and how scary this guy was. And really focusing on the differences between me and this guy. And then Seth comes through, kind of booming at me. And he said, did it ever occur to you that while you were looking out through his eyes, that he was looking out through yours? And he was wondering where these thoughts of cowardness were coming from. Because that's how he read who I was. And I was like, well, you can call me a lot of things, but coward? I thought it was, I thought everybody in that room, in the ESP class, were heroes in their own way. They were, not like Jane and Rob, but they were pioneers. It wasn't like now where, you know, there's a lot of people who talk about this stuff, who experience this stuff, and, you know, they're not, they don't feel like they're gonna get locked up for talking about this stuff. And when Seth said that, I kind of started to realize there was stuff I would be able to get from this guy, and that I would be able to give to him. And long story short, this guy had absolutely no problem trusting his energy. I mean, he created his reality, and he wasn't worried about the consequences. You know, he's like, I'm who I am. I'm in charge. I'm doing what's right. And if you don't like it, it means nothing to me that you don't like it. Whereas I was, you know, trying to make everybody happy, and I was afraid of my energy. I was afraid of, I was afraid of creating grief for someone. I was afraid of making the wrong move, the wrong decision, whatever. And this guy never, I don't think that ever crossed his mind. And over the years, he softened out a little bit, and I did learn to trust my energy. And oddly enough, I mean, I owe a whole lot of that to him. And through in other aspects of my life, he would pop up. You know, it was like, you know, the first time I went horseback riding. You know, I was astonishing. I was great. You know, I mean, it was just kind of like I knew everything there was to know about, you know, how to be on a horse and look astonishing, you know, and look really good, you know. And how does a guy from Whitestone, Queens know how to do that, you know? And at any rate, that I got from him, and then just recently, he's kind of popped up again, and I've been getting kind of an update as to, you know, what happened to him when he went home.
Yeah.
You know, when he went home back to Georgia or wherever the hell, you know, he had come from, there was nothing there. It was all gone. You know, he's burnt to the ground, you know. So he moved out west and got involved with the beef industry, which, again, I hardly eat beef. I feel, anytime I eat beef, I kind of feel guilty, you know. And here's this guy who probably had thousands of longhorns and drove them up, you know, to Kansas to sell to make his money back, and he did. And that also answered another question that I had for myself, which was, why do you love watching Westerns so much? You know, why do you so feel at home? And I still, for when I need to escape, you know, when I need a break, you know, life's getting too crazy or whatever, I'll pick up a Western. After the first 5 pages, I know how the damn thing's going to end, but that's not the point. You know, the point is, for 123 pages, you know, it's black and white, and they're good guys, they're bad guys. It's not complex, and you can pretty much pick out, who the, who's the good pretty gal, who's the bad pretty gal. I mean, all this stuff is kind of right there for you, and those guys don't make the mistakes that I make in real life. So that's the big secret, right? Since I can't do drugs, and I don't drink, my weakness is Westerns written in the early 50s, so.
Well, Lawrence, I understand we're down to 10 minutes
Oh, boy,
left, maybe
okay.
9 now. So
Let me think.
your most important
My most important?
message to all of us.
Okay, well, okay. Let me figure out
Send me $1 million doesn't come.
how to phrase this. I have lived most of my life studying the material. I still have, I still have problems. My house has gone into foreclosure. I've got health issues, and it's okay. It's really okay. I don't freak out about it. I know, in my gut, I know that sooner or later, I usually, I'll reach into the bottom of the hat and I'll pull out that rabbit, and I'll find a way to make things work. And I cannot, I don't really have the words to explain how blessed my life has been because of the material. The folks in this room are one of the few places that I could say this and not get carted off. But we are so lucky. We are so blessed to have what we have now. Besides the books that were meant for publication, and of course the early sessions and personal sessions were also meant for publication, but in a slightly different way. I think we're looking at 41 books or something like that at this point.
A lot of books, yeah.
And it cracks me up when I get on Facebook and I see people freaking out because they think there's like a secret stash somewhere of more and more and more and more books, and I'm like, you haven't read those 40 books yet. You can't fool me, I said, when you get those 40 books under your belt and you know those inside and out, you're not going to need a 42nd book, and we all, at some point, we all realize that as we grow and we change, the books grow and change. So it's like, again, I've been reading, I'm not bragging, but I've been reading this stuff since 1972, and I can go back and I can pick up Seth material and find stuff in there that I never saw before. And I wasn't really kidding when I said, the type moves around when we're not looking. And
Seth wrote for many levels.
Yeah.
At one time, so.
And it's one other thing I want to point out. We have an advantage that Jane and Rob didn't have. They didn't have all the material like we have. People talk sometimes about, well, why didn't she do this, or why didn't they do that, or whatever. And I'm like, well, Sue hadn't written her index yet. They didn't know to look up in, where to look to find the answer for that stuff, because they hadn't channeled it yet. They hadn't created it yet. we are we are blessed beyond belief. I mean, it's, when Seth talks about we've been given the gifts of the gods, that we create our reality, and when you sit back and you really, really think about what that means, it's just jaw-dropping. It's frightening, and it's the most beautiful, exciting thing in the world at the same time. It's I had the honor, I had the privilege at SethNet 97 to stand up in front of 400 people with tears in my eyes and tell Rob basically how much I loved him, how grateful I was for what he had done, for what Jane had done. And I cried, he cried. It's just, I'm losing it, but here, I mean, it's, again, besides us being blessed with the material itself, we're also blessed with this family that a lot of us don't really quite understand how important that family is, how strong some of these bonds are, and not just Samari, all the families. I happen to be a little biased about the Samari part, but I'm telling you all, you picked a really great time to be alive, and you picked a really good time to be able to read. And as that stuff becomes more available in the cloud, or some of my dear friends keep talking to me about having all, holding up these little machines and saying, I have almost all of the books in here. And I'm like, that's just not fair. Well, I would have to carry a backpack that would snap me in half, to carry all of my books. And but I'm a technophobe, and that's probably okay. That well, at any rate, it's. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know. It's the shit. It's the best. It's having the material in your life is just this magical, wonderful thing. And if I'm any help at all to inspire or scare, I hope I don't scare anybody away, but I hope to inspire people to say, look, I mean, I was this close to the edge when I found the material, and the material completely turned me around and has helped me numerous times. And even though there were a couple of times in my life where I needed, I kind of needed a vacation, a couple of years where I just wanted to, just be a redneck and, drive a pickup truck and drink a lot and not think about the material, But it doesn't work that way, and at some point, you turn around to one of your redneck friends and you go, well, why are you creating that? And they, what? And then you realize, well, you know, this isn't going to work. I'm going to have to find my family and find some Seth readers and, you know, go home, be with the people that I'm supposed to be with. And
Here we are.
that's it. Here we are.